Okay, I'm going to show you how to do the full manufacturer's test routine. Now, this is kind of a time-consuming test routine because their method for testing for leaks is cumbersome. So we recommend you try out the simple version. This actually, the manufacturer calls for actually a 5% CO2 to calibrate and then a 10% to test the span gas. Enter asset ID, operator initials. This tells us what service manual it comes out of. We agree that it's our responsibility to figure out exactly what sequence we should use for the device we're testing. This tells us which module types this apply to. This tells us that we should do this test every 4,000 hours, or if we've replaced parts, or once a year. So now we've got to pick. In the user manual, it gives us two ways of testing for leak. But, option B, you essentially take the device out, you plug off its exhaust port, and you pressurize it and measure how long it takes to leak down. You can do that method by touching option B. Option A is only good for M3015A modules that have revision A or B, with firmware revision 1.32 or lower. So we'll demonstrate that method. So we're going to enter service mode by touching main setup. Then we're going to scroll all the way down to operating modes, and we're going to touch service. And then we've got to enter the passcode 1345 for this device. And now the monitor is in service mode. So we want to verify that the pump is running. You can do that by hearing the sound of the pump running, or if you watch this scrolling message here, it'll give us the ambient pressure, and it also gives the cell pressure. The cell pressure should be approximately 20 millimeters of mercury lower than ambient pressure. Shows you that it's running. So we're going to connect the sample line to port A on the smart tank, and we are going to use our finger to block the exhaust port on the device being tested on the extension module, and you'll hear the pump speed up. We hit measure, and I'll do that again. So here I'm not blocking the exhaust port right now. You can see the flow is 48.4. Now if I block it off, we'll see that drop down, and that needs to be less than 4 milliliters a minute when it settles in. So this is essentially testing a leak downstream of the pump, and you see that's very close to zero. Okay, so we can exit out of there. It's approximately 0.4 at its lowest. Now we're going to disconnect the sample line. Gotta grab an adapter here, because I'm going to connect the exhaust line of the extension module to port A on the smart tank. So port A on the smart tank is the port that does flow measurements and pressure measurements. Okay, get that guy connected. Now it's going to have me plug the sample line of the extension module and measure what the flow changes to. So right now the flow coming out of the exhaust port is approximately 53 milliliters a minute. I'm going to plug that sample line with my thumb. See, we instantly heard the module basically shut its flow off, and so that shows us there's no leak on that side. See, that's part of the problem with this test. I think the firmware in this device is actually the one that requires us to take it out and do a leak down test, because the firmware change they made is that it instantly tries to clear the sample line rather than wait 25 seconds to do it. So this test method's really not the right one for this firmware revision of module. So next we're going to check the barometric pressure. We leave the sample line connected. Expected value is 686.3. We look right here. So we can see that in a couple places. This scrolling message shows it. It's the first of the two values. 686 is what it's reading right there. Or I can go into the main screen, go into measurements, down to CO2. And it shows it right there as well, 686 millimeters of mercury. So that's almost exactly what the Smart Tank's internal barometer is reading. Okay, next we're going to check the sample flow rate. So we connect this sample line of the extension module to port A of the Smart Tank, and we hit start. Now in our simplified test sequence, we would connect the exhaust line as well, and it would allow the Smart Tank to measure any internal leak in the system, which makes the test process much faster. But in this case, it only measured the flow. It's well within the pass criteria. We can move on. In this next test, we're going to check the noise. So we connect the sample line up to port A on the Smart Tank. Make sure we have our 5% CO2 installed in the Smart Tank, and we navigate into the CO2 menu. So we're already in the CO2 menu. We're going to touch Cal on, and we're going to make sure that the noise reading, which is this little number right next to where it says noise, should read less than 3. We've got to give it a minute to level out because it was at no gas and it went up to gas, so it's showing a really big noise. So we got to wait until it's had enough time to stabilize. There it is. So see that noise level's dropped down to 0.3. So that's a pass. Now we're going to do the gas calibration, and it tells us to make sure that the monitor or the extension module has been on for at least 20 minutes, so it's up to full temperature. We're going to go into Cal CO2, select that, select 5%, and then a Smart Tank on the next page. We have the control of Cal gas. Turn the calibration gas on, and we can hit confirm over here. Now the monitor is going to start running through its calibration procedure, and the Smart Tank is controlling the calibration gas flow. So the Smart Tank in this mode is feeding just enough gas to the gas monitor so it's not wasting much calibration gas through the exhaust port inside the Smart Tank. You'll notice too it has a countdown. If the device you're testing needs more time, you just touch that again and it resets the timer. If that timer runs out, then it just turns the cal gas off. It's a means to prevent loss of cal gas. So you can see over here it's telling us to remove cal gas. Right there, remove gas, so we can turn it off. And then we wait for the monitor to complete its calibration calculations. Right now it's saying calculating, but eventually it will say calibrated on and give a date. When it does that, it's done and the calibration's accepted. There it is, calibration done. Okay, so we can say next. So now we're going to do a cal check, so we turn the cal gas back on. We watch this value up here, the actual end tidal CO2 value. In this service mode, it calculates it continuously. And that should be 34.3 plus or minus 2.6. We want to wait till the noise is settled down. That tells us that the reading is stable. Okay, so 34.3, so it's actually exactly on what it's supposed to read. Okay, so that's done. We hit next. Now we're going to do a CO2 span check. So to do this, we've got to take the CO2 bottle that's in the Smart Tank out and replace it with the 10% bottle. I don't have that 10% bottle with me, so I'm not going to be able to complete this, but this is the last step in the sequence. You have that in there, you hit next. You can see in this case it's telling us incorrect gas because I still have the 5% gas bottle in there. So I'll abort the test and be done. Here's the test report. You can see it shows that it's aborted.